What's a conspiracy theory that later got proven to be true? The Bruce MacArthur story is a weird one. For 7 years there was a conspiracy theory of a serial killer specifically targeting gay men around Toronto was floating around, but it could never be proven. Until eventually enough evidence came up implicating him and he got caught in a sting operation. Armstrong was using an elaborate international blood transfusion scheme to cheat at bike racing. The fall of Lance Armstrong was something else. He went from a superhuman, cancer-surviving world champion to a doper who kept getting caught and trying to lie his way out of it. Jeffrey Epstein was trafficking women and children for some very elite people on a temple island. Crazy but true. I remember reading that Hunter S. Thompson was working on the story of his lifetime. One that involved a child pedophilia ring that involved many of the world's most powerful people and that it ran all the way up to the White House during the Bush Sr. administration. Before he could publish the story he was found having committed suicide. Many of his friends and family had publicly questioned the suicide in part because Thompson had said he was worried about being taken out in just such a way. I have a feeling that he was pulling on some threads that would have led to this whole Epstein ring. People forget that Thompson was an actual journalist. He was on the phone with his wife when he fired the shot. And his son, daughter-in-law, and grandchild were at the home when he did it. Unless they're all in on the conspiracy. This is a rare suicide in which there are enough witnesses to eliminate the possibility of murder. Project MK Ultra. The CIA really was experimenting on unsuspecting citizens to determine the effects of LSD. Specifically as relates to mind control. My mother tells me of how my grandfather was one of those test subjects in a local psychiatric hospital. She also told me that the doctor who administered the study later committed suicide. Government surveillance is the most obvious one. They're charging the birds as we speak. The FBI really was eavesdropping on Dr. King and Ernest Hemingway, which may have contributed to his suicide. When I listened to the Slate podcast Slow Burn about Watergate, they mentioned how to a lot people. It seemed to be the first vindicated conspiracy theory since it was first reported by tabloids and whatnot. The Lincoln assassination. That was a true conspiracy. With shadowy meetings and plans and everything. Besides Lincoln, they planned to kill the VP Johnson and Secretary of State Seward. Unlike movie conspirators, most of these guys were dolts. The VP assassin chickened out. Seward's would-be assassin succeeded in seriously wounding him but failed to kill him. JWB succeeded but was caught and killed a couple weeks later. They were all rounded up. And in the heat of the times were executed. Even Mary Surratt, who owned the boarding house where they met, was hanged. The doctor who set Booth's leg, broken during the escape, got 20 years in prison. People don't think of it as a classic conspiracy, because there wasn't a government or state-sponsored hand behind it, try as they might. The feds could never find any proof that the Confederate leadership had anything to do with it. But it was a conspiracy nonetheless. They were going to kill everyone in the line of succession up to Secretary of War Stanton. Crucial pages from Booth's diary were removed and destroyed. There are a whole bunch of evidence. By the way, did you know that all of the conspirators were in the crowd viewing Lincoln's inauguration and are identifiable in the photograph? No one gonna bring up Operation Sea Spray? The Navy was testing bacterial weaponry in 1950 on San Francisco. They released pathogens off the shore and calculated that there was enough for the whole population to get a dose. Caused a spike in urinary tract infections and a guy died. So not to minimize the severity, but it kinda gave me a chuckle when you end with one guy died because it doesn't seem serious but it really is. That the government was monitoring our phones. Hell, the government monitored all telegraph messages 100 years ago. The Epstein case really opened the door to conspiracies for me. I lost all trust in our government. Like this man had dirt on tons of high-level politicians and celebrities and magically kills himself before he has to testify? And nobody seems to be aggressively getting to the bottom of it? He was running child sex rings with world leaders. What the actual fuck? Why are we not up in arms over this? What's also shocking to me is how little the media covered it and how it's pretty much already blown over. What else has the government covered up? I believe the child sex ring is still going on. It hasn't stopped. Epstein was replaced with someone else. His longtime partner Ghislaine Maxwell is still free and presumably operating as normal. So yeah, I'm sure it is. That government agents keep asking this on Reddit to see if there are any new leaks. That is an actual possibility. This reminds me of the old Facebook Throwback Thursdays to get people to post pics of themselves many years younger. There's evidence, though not incontrovertible, that the FBI did this to help improve facial recognition. A rival of Thomas Jefferson revealed to the press that Jefferson had had an affair and several children with an enslaved person he owned. Sally Hemings, who was actually his late wife's half-sister. It was adamantly denied by the Jefferson family and historic foundations until recent DNA testing revealed it had been true. Edit, just for further context. Their arrangement was made while both Sally and Thomas were in France, where he was serving as American ambassador. At the time, Jefferson was age 44 to 46 while Hemings was age 14 to 16, and while Sally was a free woman while in France, there was certainly personal power dynamics at play. Sally, being only 1/8 African herself and by many accounts was passable. Who could have chosen to stay in France, which was in poverty at the time on the edge of the French Revolution, made the decision to return to slavery in America under the stipulation that any children she would have would be freed at age 21. Sally also had a brother, James, who Jefferson brought to France to be trained in French cuisine, who also agreed to return to enslavement. To give context, whether there was affection and legitimate romance is unclear, as their relationship was never legitimized in Jefferson's writings or otherwise. The writings left from Sally's children say he never showed them any affection, though the Hemings were said to have received preferential treatment even before the arrangement. All 5 of Sally's surviving children were freed under the agreement, and when Jefferson died, Sally was given her time, no longer given forced tasks, but never freed. When Sally died, she was buried in an unmarked enslaved person's grave. That the FBI spied on Ernest Hemingway. So I'm reading a book on this right now, and his life was extremely interesting. He was a poi for the communists because he sympathized so heavily with the working man. But he refused to call himself a communist because he was pretty unpolitical. But while he was covering the Spanish Civil War, he was unknowingly shooting communist propaganda films that were very popular in the US and with the president at the time. The book hasn't covered the actual surveillance, but it's written by a CIA researcher who mentions how thick Hemingway's file was in the foreword. Writer, Sailor, Soldier, Spy by Nicholas Reynolds. It may seem unthinkable now, but just a few decades ago, the idea that the Catholic Church was knowingly harboring pedophiles among its ranks, and would move those child molesters to different locations with fresh victims when the people at their current location became suspicious, was thought to be a conspiracy theory only believed by total tinfoil hat nutcases. Shame, it turned out to be horribly true. And the Catholic Church still hasn't cleaned up their act. If the choir boys are in less danger now, it's not because the church has cracked down on the predators, it's because normal people now know not to leave their kid alone with Father McFeely. That China harvests organs from their prisoners. The first rumors came out in the early 2000s. But everyone dismissed it since it came from Falun Gong practitioners, which were like a Chinese Buddhist cult. If you lived in any major city, you'd see them passing out flyers and protesting in front of Chinese embassies, and no one believed them. 20 years later, we all know it to be true. Did you know that this was also speculated on in WWZ, the book, as part of how the Z virus spread? Which may also be true for the current situation. Apple slows down older iPhones with software updates. They said it was to help reduce the load on the batteries as they lose performance with age. So a slower phone would make the batteries last longer. Not sure if legit or just taking advantage of that quirk in batteries and overestimating the benefit of their solution. Remember when crazies thought the CIA was listening to stuff said in your home? Now we're all like, hey, CIA, Do you know a good chicken recipe? The CIA is not listening to you. Neither is the FBI. It's the NSA that does the spying. The CIA overthrows governments and the FBI intimidates civil rights advocates. And listening is a bit of a stretch. It implies there's a guy in front of a computer physically listening to every word you say. It's not quite that simple, instead it's a bunch of servers pulling in an incredible amount of data. Far more than any number of humans could ever process. With machine learning trying to untangle it and find the criminals. Likely woefully ineffectively because this isn't a good use case for ML as the YouTube algorithm, likely the most advanced in the world by a good margin, will tell you. 30 years ago my aunt and uncle, educated scientists, told me that Harvard and the other Ivy Leagues had a secret quota they used to keep Asians limited. I stupidly thought this was crazy because I was repeatedly told affirmative action can only help you, not hurt you. And here we are. I've heard that calculations show that if affirmative action rules are lifted, whites would massively drop from universities because South Asian and East Asian students would increase. That Michael Jackson's father had him chemically castrated. His doctor confirmed it after his death. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and hit the notification button. See you next time.